Dam Safety 2024 attendees, please welcome to the stage ASDSO President Sharon Tapia.
Good morning and welcome to Denver. We are thrilled to have you all here today. This is the 40th anniversary conference here in Denver, and we have a record-setting attendance with over 1,400 people. Thank you for your support and interest. I want to kick off the general session by giving a warm welcome to the stage to Lori Spraggins, who is the Executive Director of ASDSO.
Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy and honored to be kicking off the 40th anniversary celebration. We'll be spending the next 90 minutes looking back on how ASDO was started with some great stories from some of those who were there. This was a difficult task, tapping just a few leaders from the past. There are so many others. We did ask a larger group of leaders to write their thoughts and stories down, so we want to point you towards that compilation, which is available in the conference proceedings to read. We hope you enjoy that. We're so grateful to everyone who contributed. Looking at this huge crowd, it's important to emphasize that even beyond those we've tapped, all of you and others in our membership that have all contributed, have lasting contributions to ASDO and to reducing the risks associated with dams in the U.S. We're truly bound by one mission. So with that, please enjoy and let's get started. Joining me now are two of our current board members who are going to be our moderators this morning, along with me. I have Everett Taylor from Utah and John Roach from Maryland, and take it away.
Lori, thank you so much. What a privilege and an honor to be with you all this morning and to be part of this great association. I am truly humbled to be here.
I want to echo those comments. We've had a couple months here of preparation, gotten to meet and engage with such a diverse group of dam safety professionals. It's just really inspirational. The collaboration, the community that we've built over 40 years shines through, and I think you'll see that in our session this morning.
So today, this morning, we're going to have an opportunity to talk with individuals from the different decades, the 4 decades that we honor here this morning. And it has really been, I felt, an opportunity for me to sit at the feet of giants as we've met with them over the summer and got to know them better. One of those that I'm going to just make mention of today is Lori. She's not going to be on our panel, but I want to recognize how much she has done for this association. She is incredible.
You know, sometimes there's staleness that can come to an organization, right? But Lori has really kept it alive and kept it growing. I mean, we've got new projects every year, multiple new projects that just invigorate everything we do. So again, thank you so much for keeping this organization and growing it to this spectacular audience we have here today.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
Well, with that, let's get started.
Thank you all for joining us. Let me introduce our first decade group to you all. I'm going to go from left to right. So Raul Silva is our first panelist. Raul is past president. He had served 2 terms from 92 to 94. Served on the board of directors for many years in the 90s. Currently deputy chief engineer for the Massachusetts Department of Conservation. And then we have Bill Bingham. Bill is currently a senior advisor to GEI Consultants. Bill was with Gannett Fleming for many years. Bill was one of the first chairs of and helped form the advisory committee and has served as chair on many other committees over the years. And then we have Phil Moreski. Phil was on our original board of directors. He was our first Connecticut state rep, and you are still currently with Fuss & O'Neill, I believe. And then, of course, everyone knows Susan Sorrell, my old colleague. She's been retired now for about 5 years. And Susan started in 1989 with me and worked for obviously many years with us in the headquarters office.
Thank you, Lori. Well, Phil, I'd like to start with you. As Lori just mentioned, you were on the original board and one of the founders of ASDSO. You were bringing states together to talk about dam safety issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and the value that you saw in creating this association?
Absolutely. First, let me say this is remarkable. The first conference in Denver that I attended had considerably fewer people than we have here today. This is awe-inspiring to see this many people here. So yes, I was with the state of Connecticut. Connecticut saw the invitation to join this group as the potential to provide great return to their program. Just being able to cooperate with other dam safety programs around the country and to learn from all of their experiences and strengthen numbers to actually maybe get some things done. So a little history. In 1982, Connecticut had catastrophic flooding and 15 dams failed. The state legislature investigated the dam safety program, wanting to know what their responsibility was and why these dams failed. After a thorough investigation, they realized that they hadn't supported the program well and passed legislation to provide additional funding for staff and encourage them to write regulations and so forth. At that time, we got a letter announcing the desire to form a group to advocate for dam safety, and Connecticut immediately saw the value in that, particularly after what they had just gone through. So, the concept of getting together with other dam safety groups to advocate really made sense. I volunteered and was authorized to represent Connecticut. So at our first meeting, organizational meeting in Lexington, Kentucky, it became very apparent to me that although the programs were different, they had different size dams, different number of dams, different water laws that they managed water by, the West versus the East. They had a lot of similarities as far as their challenges, staffing and funding, and the level of knowledge amongst the consultants who were designing dams and repairs to dams was greatly variable. And also the ability to compel dam owners to actually undertake repairs. So, we knew at that point that we were in good company. I found a lot of similarities with what Joe Elam went through. Joe was one of the founders of ASDSO, the first president, and his program had faced a major dam failure in the late 70s, and they were scrutinized by the legislature, and I think they were even sued. His vision coming out of that was for a group that would advocate for dam safety, and he thought it would be patterned after the National Association of Police Chiefs, an advocacy group for law enforcement. And so that was his vision going into the formation of this group. So I think that's probably what I wanted to get out. Be happy to speak further on this if you wish.
Thank you. No, I see the value in bringing together a collective, and you mentioned Joe Elam from Pennsylvania. You also mentioned water in the East and West being a little different. One of the members of that original board who can't be with us here today was Jairus Danielson, who also helped found this, saw the value. He was from Colorado right here in Denver. He was the state engineer and saw value in participating in that. While Jairus couldn't be with us here today in person, we do have the opportunity to do a video interview with him. So we'll play that now.
I'm Jairus Danielson. I was state engineer for the state of Colorado for about 17 years, appointed by Governor Dick Lamb. One of the duties as state engineer is the dam safety program. So I was very happy to be instrumental in the formation of the association. To start this out, I guess I'm speaking to you about the Cretaceous area of ASDSO. It was in the early 1980s that several of our state dam safety programs, we got together and decided that we really needed to develop an association that would represent the states. As you know, at that time, there was no affiliation, no technical support for any of the state dam safety programs. An example, I was appointed by Governor Lamb to be state engineer, and one of those duties is to operate the Colorado State Dam Safety Program. When I took over that job, the first thing I did was I went, because it's a very important aspect of the job, I went down to my dam safety guy, and we had a little chat, and I asked him, what methodology, what protocol do you use to design or evaluate spillway capacity? And he said, well, I go down to the First County Road and look at the state culvert there and decide what that culvert would carry, and then we design the dam for that amount. That's pretty scary. And that's kind of the state that we were in the early 80s. So Joe Elam, Del Crandall from New Hampshire, Elam from Pennsylvania, Charlie from North Carolina, we got on the phone and said, you know, we really need to do something. And so we called a meeting in '83 in Denver and invited all of the state dam safety program bosses to come and talk about whether we needed an association. This was not received very well by several states. They feared that this might usurp some of their independence, or they were just concerned about having another organization. But if you recall back at that time, there had been some dam failures, and the federal agencies, Corps of Engineers, TVA, FERC, Bureau of Reclamation, were looking at the national dam safety issue, or national dam safety programs from a national issue, and decided there really needed to be something done. Of course, those agencies deal with very large structures and not very many of them. When they took a look at the thousands of dams that are spread across the country that are under local jurisdiction or perhaps under state jurisdiction, I think they got a little frightened and they didn't really want to take on that kind of a task. So we got a lot of encouragement from the feds in terms of developing an association that would assist state programs and strengthen them and bring us in at least to the 20th century in terms of dam safety. So we had a meeting. I decided to form ASDSO, and it kind of took off from there. The association grew, and we really welcomed the feds because they brought a lot of technical capability to us. And we also reached out to the private consulting sector because most state dams or local dams are designed by private engineering consultants. And so we thought we needed to make it known to them that we were looking at developing some statewide or nationwide criteria for the state dam programs. At the outset, no state was talking to any other state in terms of technical approaches or legislative approaches, and we just hoped to create an association that would give us a communication forum for dam safety, and that would allow, as I said before, experiences to be shared. And so we just hope to create a situation where people could share experience and learn and grow. Well, I just would thank the association for allowing me to address it, even if momentarily. I'm really proud of how the group has grown from almost nothing to I think an internationally recognized dam safety program or association. And I'm just kind of proud of that. And I wish everyone to have a great conference, enjoy Denver, and spend a lot of money.
So, Raul, Phil and Jairus kind of touched on it. You know, this era in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of program modernization or revamp. Even those programs that had states that had a dam safety program, it was evolving. And there was a spirit of information sharing, and, you know, we've all got each other's backs. And you were in the thick of it in Massachusetts doing the same with your program. So can you share a little bit of your experiences?
Absolutely. I think I can harp on a couple of the themes that you saw in the introductory video. At the founding of the association, more than half of the states really had programs in paper only. No legislation, no regulations, staffing, budget. And so we in Massachusetts, I think, are a great example of how the association provided direct support and resources. My boss attended the Denver conference. He couldn't be here, but he came back from that conference with a directory of all 50 states. And asked me to contact everyone and get their regulations and their laws and what they had for funding. And we pulled together, after that review, our own set of legislation and regulations. And we based ours on Pennsylvania's primarily, but New Jersey and New Hampshire's. And you saw the Kelly Barnes failure. The reason we based ours on Pennsylvania was the unfortunate reality in the public sector is policy is oftentimes reactionary. So because Pennsylvania went through those series of failures in the 70s, in the 80s, they had a really model program. They had staffing, they had budget, they had a really crisp organization. So we based our regs primarily on them. So it was really a direct support. And I shared this with my colleague that you'll see in the next decade, John Moyle from New Jersey. And I said, well, we based some of our stuff. John had a great funding program. And he goes, well, we based our program's regs on Ohio's. So you could see the direct trickle down, the direct information sharing that led to really the formation of our state program and probably 20 or 30 others since the beginning. The last comment I'll make is something that Jerry's mentioned, membership. You saw a huge increase in membership in the first decade. And somewhere in there, Jerris I consider him a mentor of mine, and he mentioned Del Downing from New Hampshire, who was part of that organizing committee. We reached 50 states as members. And Del grabbed me and he says, well, membership drive over. We've got all 50 states. And it was a discussion. I don't want to say a debate. I don't want to say it was heated. But it really was something we felt strongly about, to have a net, a tent that would provide consulting engineers, federal employees, contractors, dam owners. And if you look around the room today, I think those visions have really been realized. So that tent is, I think, the strength, one of the strengths of the association. So I'm sitting next to somebody you'll hear from that led the peer review program. So the peer review program, model state dam safety program, all of those sort of foundational pillars we took full advantage of in Massachusetts. And I think, again, we were a representative state that probably 30 or 40 others fell behind.
Raul, I love that, to hear just the friendship, the camaraderie between the states as each other was facing similar issues and helping each other to overcome them.
So there's one other comment I'll make, and again, Jerris is a mentor and I love him. State engineer. Coming from Massachusetts, I hadn't heard that title. In your state, you've got state engineer in Utah. And again, I'm young, I don't want to ask an embarrassing question. In Massachusetts, we've got DOT, we have DEP, we've got this, we've got that. Every agency, my agency has a chief engineer. And Jerris, sort of explained it to me. Well, this is organizationally, and your state's 300 years old. You guys didn't know how to build state government. We built it right in Colorado. I report right up to the governor. I'm in charge of all the engineering, right? So again, I'm the wise guy kid, and my response was, well, maybe you guys should build more stuff, right? That one engineer, but his executive management was so helpful to me. There was a spirit of, again, mentorship. That original board, I believe, had 3 state engineers, people like Joe Allen that reported directly to the governor. So for us in the public sector, just to see how that leadership would be conveyed to us, really, really helpful.
Yeah. I love, too, in all of that leadership, they didn't forget who was up and coming, so they would talk to a wise guy kid. And Susan, last night you came and sat with me and my wife at the kickoff event, and I felt that very much. Like, here's Susan Sorrell that helped build this association. It started in 1989, as Lori mentioned. What was that like? Coming in, you were in your 20s, right? And you had, as Rawls mentioned, maybe some older gentlemen, some distinguished gentlemen that had opinions. And so tell me what that was like.
Okay, sure. First, I want to say thank you so much to Raul for bringing up the tent idea, because I literally wrote in my notes over the weekend. As I look back over the 30 years that I spent with ASDSO, I think of all the things that I feel like we did right. And all of the things that we did right can be directly linked to decisions that opened up the tent, that brought in diverse opinions, even conflicting opinions, and a wide variety of people and perspectives. And that's what has enriched this organization more than anything that we've done. And I think that's how we got to where we are today, where we're celebrating longevity and success. So I just wanted to make that, emphasize that point. When Lori hired me as her assistant, we were both in our 20s. ASDO had headquarters offices in a building on the campus of the University of Kentucky that had been a dormitory in the 1940s. So our offices were dorm rooms connected by a hallway. And the two things that I became my areas of responsibility early on were membership and conferences. In the early 1990s, the techiest guy that we knew was Hal Van Eller from Maryland. He came to our offices one summer and wrote us a database program in like DOS and taught us how to use it, and we put our membership data in there, and we just were so impressed with ourselves.
It's a good memory. I forgot about Hal. Thanks, Hal.
Thanks, Hal. We were so impressed with ourselves. And membership, again, as Raul alluded to, once we had a membership committee, just kind of exploded from there. After a while, we realized we needed to create a little more opportunity, a little more access for people who wanted to participate in the organization. We created new membership categories because we realized we needed to maximize the involvement of our private sector partners. We needed to reach out to younger people who might be just thinking about considering a career in dam safety. And we wanted to corral and safeguard the enthusiasm of our members who might not be currently actively employed, but we're still passionate about ASDO and dam safety. So we created new membership categories. On the conferences side of things, I'll just tell a quick story about my first annual conference I attended in Albuquerque in 1989, where everybody was there to see Ralph Peck. He gave the keynote address. Lori and I were 2 of 3 women attendees, participants in that conference. The third woman was Eve Gruntfest, and you guys might remember her. She was a professor of geology at the University of Colorado. And I always thought it was very fitting that the first professional dam safety person, female person that I met was named Eve. Now, I look out at this room, half the humans in this room are women, and by the end of this session today, you will have met all 3 of the women who have been or will be presidents of ASDO, and I'm very proud of that fact.
So, Bill, you were one of those affiliate members, maybe the dissenting voices or helping voice, as Raul mentioned. But, you know, as strong as all the state dam safety programs are, we wouldn't be anywhere in this association and where we are in the practice of dam safety without the private sector involvement. And, you know, you are one of the founding kind of persons who helped bring that private sector involvement into the association. So can you tell us, you know, what did you think about this? Was it a good investment in your time? Was it, you know, were you hoping to get something out of it? Or how did that feel in the beginning of the association?
Wow, good investment of my time. I'm still here.
All right.
And I'm the only one here, I think, that's more than twice as old as ASDSO. But, you know, I've always viewed the dam safety function as a three-legged stool. The regulators, the owners, and then industry, consultants, contractors. And dam safety to be successful needed all three of those elements. So when ASDSO allowed us to enter into really a meaningful role within ASDSO, I think that was key. One of the early outcomes of ASDSO was forming the ADCOM. Initially it was called AMAC, or Affiliate Member Advisory Committee, and then it was later changed to ADCOM. And an early thing that came out of the ADCOM was peer review. And I was privileged to lead that early effort, and we modeled the peer review program after an ASCE peer review program, and we came up with the first manual to do peer reviews of state regulatory programs. And that was really the beginning of, for me, of forging relationships that have lasted my entire career and even beyond. So I'm happy for that opportunity, and that was definitely a payback on the investment. My very first memory of ASDSO came in 1984. I'm at offices in Harrisburg of DER. That's where Joe Allen sat as head of dam safety in Pennsylvania. And I'm trying to get a permit for a dam rehab project. Towards the end of the meeting, Joe says, "Bingham, if you want to get anywhere in this dam business, you ought to join ASDSO." Now, I took that to be code for, if you want this permit, here's an application to join ASDSO. That was typical Joe. I joined the next day, and it made all the difference. I got the permit, but I also got a whole lot more. So that was the beginning of a lot of great relationships that made a big difference in my career. And that makes me think about a book that I read a while back called 10 Men I Met in the Huddle. It was written by Bill Curry, and he was paying homage to those in his football life that were influential. Well, I have 10 men I met at the dam. And if you allow me, I'll make an apology for not including some others that were influential as well. Number one was Joe Ellum. He's the intimidator, the godfather, the builder, and Joe always filled the room. He was not afraid to shake status quo. Number two, Dell Downing. You heard about Dell earlier. Dell was, I called him the teacher. He taught us organization. He was a parliamentarian, so he was really good at organization. Brad Arossi, the counselor. He always was ready to give us good counsel, and he's a great friend. George Mills. George isn't here, but George, the general, as in General Mills. He was fun to be around, rather, generally speaking. And that brings me to number 5. This guy to my right, Raul Silva. Raul, I titled him the winner because we could never beat him on the golf course. And he's a true New England patriot in every way imaginable and a great friend to this day. And that goes back a long way. Number 6 on this list is John Moyle. And John's the leader. He has led almost every committee within ASDSO. He was president twice. He's great at golf, Italian gravy, and Pappy Van Winkle. And John's a great friend. Steve Varrigan, the recruiter. He recruited many of us, many people in this room. and he's a peer review champion and a great friend. Brings us to number 8, Dick Knitter. Who can forget Dick Knitter on 60 Minutes back in the day when he was doing a dam inspection for that TV program, and he's in a conduit and he's got a range pole and he's banging at the roof of the conduit and chunks of concrete are coming down, and he's trying to make a point about dams needing rehabilitation. 9 and 10, I'm going to do those together. That's Lori and Susan. They were the coaches of this group of, really at the time, was mostly men and a lot older than Lori and Susan. So they did a great job of inspiring us back in 1988, 89. They're still here. And they were the executive office back then, as you've heard. And they did everything, including herding cats, which is all of us now. And that brings me back to, I just want to relate one personal story. Back in this, about the end of the decade, about 94, my wife and I, along with our 2 boys, had just finished a big backyard pond in Camp Hill, and we decided to have a pig roast to dedicate this pond. And I invited a lot of colleagues, including Joe Ellum. Joe shows up, and he was like the hit of the day. First thing he did was he read a earth disturbance violation letter to me for not having a permit to disturb the earth, which was an official thing back then with Pennsylvania DER. He says, but I also have a dam permit for you. He says, because I noticed at the lower end of that pond, there's about a 1-foot high embankment, so you need a dam permit, Bingham, and you don't have one. So here it is. I cherish that permit. I still have it to this day, and I cherish my relationship with Joe like many of you. So I would just say my memory and recollection mostly about ASDSO is about friendships and relationships that were really the keystone of my career. And if I hadn't had ASDSO, Joe would have been absolutely right. I would not have gotten anywhere in this dam business. And so I owe that to Joe. And I would say that all of you in industry and also the state regulators of today owe it to those founders who had a relentless drive for dam safety to get us where we are here today. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Bill, thanks. And we could probably sit up here for another 3 or 4 hours and just cancel the rest of the sessions for the day, but it's time to move on to our second decade. So thanks again for all of our first decade panelists.
Second decade. Again, from left to right. We have Brad Arossi. Brad was president from 98 to 99, was the Maryland Dam Safety Program director at the time also. He served as our Legislative Activities Committee chair for 18 years. And Brad has since been with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and served on a lot of other ASDSO committees. Becky Reagan is with us today. She runs the National Inventory of Dams at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, so glad to have Becky with us. John Moyle is next. John served 2 terms as president at separate times, 2001 to 2, and then again 2010 to 11. And John, as most of you know, was bureau chief of dam safety with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and he's obviously served on a lot of other committees. Doug Johnson is next. Doug served as president from 2002 to 2003, served on a lot of committees. He was with the state of Washington at the time and has been with FERC for many years. And then we have Meg Galloway, who served as president from 2004 to 5. She was with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and is now with the Association of State Floodplain Managers. And then last but not least is Bob Dalton, and Bob served as president from 2000 to 2001 and was with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources for many years when you were with us as president. So welcome.
All right, welcome everybody. And this decade, it stands out in my mind, the 95 to 2004, and maybe I'm not gonna say how old I was during that decade, but there was a lot of changes happening in the world, right? It was Y2K, it was 9/11, technology was booming, people were cloning sheep. You know, it was kind of a wild time. And in that time frame too, we finally elected our first woman president of the association, and that's Meg. And so Meg, you know, how was it like in that decade, and what were some of your accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think at the time I was elected as president, I wasn't thinking too much about being the first female president. I started out in Wisconsin's dam safety program. Dick Knitter, who Bill Bingham mentioned, was my supervisor, and I was in that culvert with him when he was slamming the range pole into the roof and the cameraman was trying to back out. So when Dick retired, I became the state dam safety engineer for Wisconsin, and my supervisor at that time was very much pushed employees to become involved in advocacy and education programs. So when I started going as a the state representative to the Midwest Caucus, and then when there was a spot open for the Midwest on the board, I was encouraged to apply for that, and it just kind of progressed naturally, and it was such an exciting endeavor to be involved in this at a national level. So getting to be president was just seemed like should naturally happen. And it took me really until here coming and preparing for this to realize that there had not been another woman president since I started. But now we have some really great people in Sharon, who just is finishing up her wonderful presidency, and Mia, who I remember as a brand new engineer coming into the Ohio Dam Safety Program.
Well, Meg, don't discount yourself. You were one of those greats that came in and led the way for those others. Working with Sharon and Mia, they are incredible. Bob, I want to go to you. We maybe didn't share this story this summer, but I learned as you were president in 2001, the conference was being held in Utah, my home state. It was before I was in dam safety, but apparently there was a movement to maybe make the dress code a little more casual. And my predecessor, Matt Linden, while you were presenting at the keynote, came up and cut off your tie.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, I have that.
Well, in all that frivolity, you also were dealing with the 9/11 situation as we recognize and remember that. Can you just kind of tell us what were your feelings as you led that conference and were dealing with not only moving the organization, the association forward, but also helping people to cope with and handle what was happening nationally?
Okay, well, as Everett mentioned, when we were preparing for the conference, it was going to be, okay, we're going to change the dress code. We're not going to be coat and tie so much as we had been in the past. And
So on that opening day when we had that session, and I'm wearing my coat and tie as president of the association, Matt comes up and admonishes me and cuts my tie off, and then I think we played a game of Jeopardy among the various board members to provide the information about what the association had done in the previous year, you know, what we were doing, what the growth was. And so that was all on Monday. And then Tuesday, the breakfast, like you had here, but it was outside, and skies were blue. They had TVs out there, and as we're having breakfast, we're seeing the impact of the attacks on the World Trade Center. So that came forward quite vividly for those of us that were standing outside. So we opened the session with a minute of silence to consider all that had happened and care for those that were impacted. And we went forward, held the conference, did our meetings and all of those things that needed to be accomplished to keep things moving forward.
Well, thank you, Bob. I can see, I remember where I was that day, and certainly our hearts go out to those who were affected by that. We still feel that. I'm going to note, maybe turning to more of the comedic side to me, is decade one is not wearing a tie. Decade two are still wearing ties, so someone got the memo. Well, coming out of 9/11, John, I'm going to go to you. Suddenly there's a call for what do we do with security and how do we increase that and infrastructure, and I know you've played a pivotal role in that. Can you tell us your experience?
Sure. So, as Bob indicated, we were up in Snowbird, and certainly when the horrific attack occurred, you know, we all knew people back on the East Coast. A lot of people that were in the World Trade Center lived in New Jersey. So me, Raul Silva, John Ritchie, program committee chair, we said, okay, we got to get home. So the first thing we did was, you know, we made arrangements to get a car at the airport. Fortunately, when we got to the airport, we looked up on the screen, and this was Thursday. There was a flight going back to Newark Airport. We flew into Newark, and unfortunately, you know, the plane comes over the sky, and you look down onto the New York City, and you could see the World Trade Center. You could see the smoke. You could see the lights flashing. It really hit home. From that point on, as president of the association, I became the state security guy. So, you know, me and Lori had several meetings that year with the Bureau of Reclamation, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, all trying to determine, are dams vulnerable to terroristic attacks? And no one had the answer at the time. So over those first couple of years, we did a lot of meetings, coordination, and then ultimately in 2002, DHS was formed. Shortly thereafter, the Government Coordinating Council was established for both government and private sector. And I was a member of that, as well as Lori was for the rest of my career before I retired 2 years ago. But it just shows that, you know, the association and the ability to communicate and meet with people down in DC, we learned a lot. The coordinating council was formed, and it just, through their efforts, it's important that they continue to make sure that both the private and the public sector can work together to ensure the nation's critical infrastructure dams.
So, John, you probably bumped into Brad in DC a couple times then, huh? In that time frame.
what I worked with Brad a lot, and then ultimately when he went to the federal government, he couldn't do our legislative activities. And I was a short trip between New Jersey and DC, so I was selected as the person to go down to DC. And a lot of times, my staff, JR would tell you, I would just disappear from the office, get on the train. Because if you work for the state, you know how bureaucracy is in going to DC. But I survived. I retired after 42 years and never got in trouble. I was in DC a few times when we had major incidents in New Jersey where my staff had to pick up the ball. But, it all worked out well.
So Brad, you spent a lot of time advocating for dam safety in the association through legislative activities and also with ASCE and launching the report card for dams too. So what was that like, and what were your, how did we get people to listen to us in those decision-making roles?
Well, ASDSO's legislative advocacy started back in like 1992. And one of our first major goals was to get the National Dam Safety Program Act passed. And so that was a classic ASDSO project that involved so many members. We did testimony before the Senate Public Works Committee. We did testimony before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. We had dozens and dozens of meetings in Capitol Hill with staff. And we had a wonderful partner in the American Society of Civil Engineers. They would help us prepare and they coach us on our testimony. They would arrange for the testimony. They would accompany us with our testimony. They arranged for multiple visits with Capitol Hill staff members in order to get the National Dam Safety Program passed. And then later on, the Association of State Dam Safety Officials, the ASCE, would publish a report card on the nation's infrastructure. And dams was part of that, and dams finally was no longer the orphan child of infrastructure. They got equal notification and equal attention with other infrastructure like bridges and roads and water supply. But the reason we got the National Dam Safety Program Act passed was the amount of effort from ASDSO's members. We had members, we had state reps, and a great contribution from the Affiliate Advisory Committee. They contacted their U.S. senators at home. They contacted their House members. Oftentimes they would make visits in their home state and their offices. And we finally got the National Dam Safety Act passed in 1996. But instead of continuing to talk with legislative advocacy, I'm going to break from my script here and just recall a story that in 1989, I applied for the Dam Safety Program chief in the state of Maryland. I had no dam safety experience whatsoever. But somehow I got the job, and I got the job over 3 engineers who worked there who had tremendous experience in dam safety. They very quickly became my mentors and my colleagues and my very dear friends right now. And after I got the job, my predecessor advised me, oh, by the way, we're committed to be on this board of directors of this dam association. And also, by the way, you're the chairman of the membership committee. So my first visit to the board of directors was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I go out there, and it's a tough group. It's a rough group of people. They've been doing dam safety for quite a long time. And I'm going to panic. They're going to find out I have no experience at all. So part of the board meeting was the chair of all the committees would give a little update about what their committee is doing. So when it came time for me to give an update on the membership committee, I thought, boy, I have to impress these guys. I'm desperate to impress these guys and to hide my insecurity about having no dam safety experience. So I told them, we should have a bold number. We should look for a great number. We should have a great goal for membership. And so I told them, we should shoot for 300 members. And when I said that, they laughed hysterically. They wouldn't stop laughing. They laughed so hard I was embarrassed I even said it. And one of them said, are you out of your mind? There's only 50 states. And so I look back on that and chuckle. I guess I should have picked something much bigger than 300. But I look at ASDSO's membership now, and we're approaching 4,000. I think that's remarkable. I think this speaks to how valuable ASDSO is and their success. And the other comment, I look back on that, and I feel so lucky that I stumbled into this wonderful dam safety career. I really do.
So, thanks, Brad. Doug, you've relayed that it wasn't always smooth sailing with our federal partners. I'm wondering if you can briefly let us know some of the rocky relationships that we've endured through the years, and hopefully we've moved past that. But
right, I consider my term as president as a trial by fire, and it was a difficult year because of a disagreement over an email, basically, is what it boiled down to. But that year we did not get our funding, and I think that made ASDSO realize that we were too reliant on one source of funding. So in a way, it was almost a good thing, because at that point the board decided to develop what they called the BOB, a base operating budget, so that we would have enough money to keep going through dues and donations and other means. So eventually we managed to make it through, and I think the association was stronger at that point for it.
that's great. The adversity always, makes us stronger.
All right, we're coming to a close on Decade 2, but I want to get to Becky. You are one of our federal partners that we love. You've basically been in charge of the National Inventory of Dams, NID, which looks fabulous. I absolutely love it.
Thank you.
Can you just tell us, you came in, you're tasked with building this database, you've got to work with 50 unruly states, maybe, and how was that herding cats? How was that, what hurdles did you have to overcome to get
So, just like Lori and Susan, we went to Hal Van Aller first because Brad had told us about this great program that Maryland was using, and I had never heard of Paradox database program. So he showed us the ropes, and then we started collecting data. But 1997, 98 was my first conference, but it was just amazing getting data on CD drives, 5 1/4, 3.5 diskettes. I won't say the state because I actually don't remember, but we actually got Word documents with like word tables, with the dam information. Some wanted to send us inspection reports. So it was just all of this stuff. And then it was just interesting because they're like, oh, well, I got to wait for my summer intern to come to enter in all the data into the database so then I can send you my data. So it was just a lot of information coming, trying to decide on the data definitions, and just making sure that we were all on the same page was very interesting to someone like Brad, who I'm not a dam safety person, so this was all new to me. And the states have always just been so patient with us, and everybody just sees the purpose of the NID and just having that authoritative data source, and it just takes a lot of people to put that through, and ASDSO was always a proud sponsor of that and helping us reach out to all the 50 states that contribute more than 90% of the data in the NID. So we're very thankful of the relationship that the Corps has with ASDSO when it comes to the National Inventory Dam. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Becky. We're really grateful to you and your patience with us as we get that information back to you. I also always appreciate you have a game at the exhibit hall, and I think every one of my 4 kids...
It's a new game, so come check out Federal Row.
And every one of my 4 kids has a stuffed beaver because of those games. So thank you. Well, we could be up here with Decade 2 again for another hour, but we're going to invite you to step back, and we're going to move on to Decade 3. Thank you.
Okay, almost done with this. A few more pictures. All right, Decade 3. Jason Campbell served as president from 2012 to 2013. He was with the state of Illinois for many years and now works with Vistra Energy. Ken Smith served as president from 2005 to 2006. And Ken is currently the Assistant Director for the Indiana Department of Natural Resources and was manager of the Dam and Levee Safety Program at the time he was president. Ken has obviously served on many committees, as everyone else on our panel has. Dave Gutierrez is next. He served as president from 2009 to 10, and on many committees. He was the division chief for the California Division of Safety of Dams for a long time and is now with GEI Consultants. And finally, Jim Gallagher served from 2006 to 7 as president, spent many years with the state of New Hampshire and other federal agencies, and is now retired.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm just excited to talk with Decade 3. Doug Johnson, coming out of Decade 2, kind of mentioned that there was this realization in the association that there needed to be a base operating budget. And I feel like Decade 3 was really a time when ASDSO started to recognize that we need to invest in ourselves, and has been a common thread throughout, continue to invest in our membership and really build that membership.
And so some of that investment has really, grown the organization and the stature of the organization, not just in the country, but around the world. And Jim, you had a pretty fun experience in that regard, right?
I did. Actually, yeah, it was a trip of a lifetime. Back in 2007, the country of Brazil, the dam safety community in particular, was interested in developing a National Dam Safety Act. They had some serious failures recently, and one of our members from Brazil, Selmo Kupperman, he reached out to ASDSO and invited us to their annual conference, their Committee of Large Dams, to speak to them about how we in the U.S. developed our National Dam Safety Act and how ASDSO worked over the years to continue to strengthen that. So I was president. I was a lucky guy as a president at the time. My good friend Brad Iarossi, who was still doing government relations at that time, came with me, as well as Bob Finucane, who's the only guy who could speak Portuguese. And I think actually the invitation came in through Bob. But so we met with them. We had these translators, these simultaneous translators like they have at the UN, who had to translate my Boston accent. Lucky them. But we spoke to them about the evolution of the Dam Safety Act here, how it also followed failures in this country, really provided them the same kind of information that's been shown on these videos of our history. And what I very pleased was in 2010, 3 years later, the country of Brazil passed their they call their Dam Safety Act, which has many of the same components that our National Dam Safety Act has.
That's great to see our influence spread out.
Yeah, and I do want to add that it did, just like John indicated, it kind of dovetailed with the transition of our mission. At that time, we did a new strategic plan in 2006. Up until that time, our focus was on strengthening the U.S. dam safety community. And the 2006 strategic plan, the vision statement was revised to state all dams are safe, to more global perspective. And this trip really dovetailed well with that transition. And in the vision statement, that vision statement is still the vision statement of the organization today.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jim. Jason, I want to go to you. You were in the Illinois Dam Safety Program and served as president of ASDSO. Throughout this decade, from your perspective, where was the most growth in the association?
So I've tried to think about how I would answer this, and I didn't feel like there was anything that was more growth in one area than another. I just felt like we grew. I think there was a lot of change, and I think especially in some of our training, there was a significant amount of change. By this decade, the internet had been around long enough, and some of us finally figured out how to use things, and a lot of our training typically up to this point had been the classroom-based seminars. You go someplace. You go to a 2-day, a 3-day seminar, and we really started bringing in the online type training, which if you look at it now, I mean, it's huge. It's a really big part of our training program. So I think as far as the biggest change, I think is in the training side of stuff. But we had change all through the decade, and I felt like, I've been trying to think of a story to tell during my presidency, and I was telling these guys the other night, it's like, I don't hardly remember that year. It literally just flew by, and it was really good to hear Brad's story because I felt the same way. I started out with the state literally within 6 months. They said, "Hey, you're going to go to this conference, and you're now the state rep," and I had to try to figure out what that meant. Didn't know. I'm freaking out because I got to vote on something that I'd never been involved in an organization like this. I didn't even know how you voted. So like Brad, I was trying to hide my stupidity. But we did a lot of things during that decade. You heard from the first decade. Susan mentioned the office started in a dorm room. By this time, we were in some smaller office spaces there in Lexington. And Lori forever had always wanted her own office. We really needed to grow. We needed to get out of this smaller space. And so we started exploring that. We bought the office building. We moved it there. That's allowed them to be able to increase the staffing. And so again, a lot of change.
So we've heard about Dick Knitter and the knitter stick. And there's probably a lot of people out in the room who are thinking, what are we talking about? So bonus points, conference bonus points for anybody who can find a link and share it so we can, everybody can see that. But, that was a big national press, media thing, and engineers love to stand up in front of people and talk, right? Ken, you've been involved in the media outreach committee in ASDSO, and sending that message and collaborating and making us heard. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. When I really think back over all the years, one thing I'd point out first is we're talking about some single events here, but most of us have been involved with the organization for decades, and it's been a growing experience throughout all of that time. I think that also includes with communication activities. There's many ways as engineers and professionals we can learn the nuts and bolts of our profession, but the ability to work with folks from other states and learn from outside your organization, be mentored by people in this group, be active in different things, it really kind of comes full circle in that basic mission of the organization to do outreach, to teach, to strive to work together beyond just our state programs with things nationally. Communication is certainly a part of that. As technical folks, we're taught a lot how to speak about the science and about particular facts and things, but that's often not what the public needs to hear. It's not what the reporters are looking for. They're looking for more information beyond that. They're looking for some independent thought and a third party sort of evaluation of things that are going on. And when I think back early to watching some of the incidents around the country and around the state, that third-party perspective of somebody that was impartial on things really wasn't there. You'd see owners speak when there was an incident, and they'd say the things that would expect them to, my dam's been there forever, so I thought it was safe, They'd get that sort of comment. The state officials wouldn't feel they could comment on an incident that would happen. And the press would look for third-party people to make comments, and often would sit around afterwards and say, who was that individual? We don't even know them. They weren't part of the organization, and they'd say so many things wrong. So we went out of our way, ASDSO, to start forming an actual communication plan to become proactive instead of just reactive, and really begin to put down key essential points that we wanted to make about dam safety in general around the country. And that's still very much an active thing. And it's part of the whole lessons that I hope people in the audience all learn with us along the way, is to be better communicators about the bigger picture and the perspective. Because when an incident happens, you don't want to just sit there and start speculating. You know you can't answer that. You need to have bigger picture, specific key messages that we all sort of understand and focus on in our role with the association.
And thanks for that, Ken. And earlier in Utah this year, I experienced that need to interact with the media. I just love to hear how we had more of a global presence. Jim, you mentioned going to Brazil, and Ken, more interaction with the media. Jason, you talked about how you don't really remember that year as president, how things were going smoothly. And I just think back to a team building exercise, team forming, and I think I go through 4 phases, right? They're forming, storming, norming, and then performing. And I feel like maybe this decade the association was norming a little bit, kind of getting into our groove and moving forward. So Dave, I want to go to you. You've been involved with dam safety for over 20 years. You worked for California Safety of Dams. You were the chief of that division, and now you've retired and you work in the private industry. I would love to hear, as one who maybe will get there, or maybe I'm asking for a friend, what's your perspective, the growth of the association from both the state side that you've seen as well as from the private industry side?
I don't really see, I wouldn't say that my perspective of ASDSO has changed. I think a better way to put it is maybe the benefits of the organization when I was a state regulator, or the benefits as a consultant and the clients that I have, maybe that's changed. And that's changed as ASDSO has broadened and grown. And I think you've heard that theme throughout the conference today. I think that was the vision. The vision starting out as a state programs to strengthen those state programs, but the vision met the goal to make all dams safe, and as you heard others talk about, that had to include everybody. And a couple of good examples I kind of think about, and I think it's maybe past 20 years, maybe a little bit before that. I worked with Susan, who guided myself and Randy Bass and Rodney Torres. And what we were doing is we were developing the technical training program. And I remember going in there, we didn't really have we had training, but not the technical training aspects of it. And so I remember developing about a dozen or 2 dozen course syllabus. And the idea was we're going to develop those, and then they're going to go out and they're going to help state dam safety programs by training those folks to be dam safety professionals. Since then, that program has grown tremendously. And so not only do the state dam safety programs take advantage of that, but consulting engineers, dam owners, et cetera. Another perfect example is the actual peer review program. So I think I was on the second version, maybe the first version, second version of writing that peer review program manual. And at the time, we would go all across the country, and we would actually peer review state programs with the idea to increase their knowledge and their capabilities of running a state program. Very recently, though, more recently, under the direction of Tony Fernandez and Bill Bingham and quite a few others, that program has expanded. So now we're out doing peer review programs of other owners throughout the country. And certainly as a engineer working with many of those clients, I encourage them to go through those peer review programs to help those programs. So I think the theme has followed with what I think you've seen here today as ASDSO has broadened. We're meeting that goal of making all dams safe collectively. So it's not necessarily a perspective of being a regulator or being a consultant. It's kind of all in the same boat, and we're using all of the same tools that I think ASDSO's original vision to grow this program and make all dams safe. So it's been an absolute honor working on those programs 2, 3, 4 decades ago, and then leaving them and seeing how great they've grown. So it's really exciting to see.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience, and just been a pleasure. I know you and I got to work the last few years on a collaboration with USSD, and that was great to work with you. And really a good reminder, those elements still exist in our strategic plan to strengthen state dam safety programs, but also to foster the dam safety community at large and really help that community. So I love to hear your experience and seeing that in the association as we continue on. Well, that concludes our time with Decade 3. We're going to move on to Decade 4. Thank you.
All right. We're running a little long, so but we're going to make it. So we've brought Sharon back out with us. She's on the right here, but from the left to right, Mia Kanik is our incoming president. Mia's from Ohio. Bill McCormick is next. He was president from 2020 to 2021 and continues to serve on a lot of committees. Bill was with the Colorado Division of Water Resources at the time of his presidency and is now with Black & Veatch. Mark Ogden was actually president in the last decade, but we brought him out because he's been working with us as a staff member during this last decade, so we want to get his perspective on that. So he was the president from 2007 to 2008. David Griffin is currently on the board. He's our immediate past president, and he's with the state of Georgia. And then John Garton served as president from 2017 to 2018, continues to serve on many committees, and is the dam safety engineer for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources.
All right, thanks. I mean, we've talked a lot today about that bound by one mission, right? A future where all dams are safe. And Bill and John, you might be kind of bound by an shared experience as well, and that's, handling, a dam failure, multiple dams in the aftermath, with the Delhi Dam failure and the Front Range flooding that you experienced in Colorado. So how did that shape your perspective of, this decade and what the ASDSO brought to help assist you with those incidents?
Yeah, I think the Delhi Dam failure is a good example of the association, one person sort of kicking off a whole movement. And, post-Delhi, Mark Baker made a call to Iowa to help with the dam failure investigation and get that going, which sort of led to a panel discussion that fall at the conference, which led to the committee, which obviously is built into the damfailures.org and all the other great resources. So it's just a great example of one event or one person kicking off a lot of the great resources and tools that we have.
Yeah, and for Colorado, in the aftermath of the 2013 floods, we also got the Mark Baker and Dusty Myers guidelines on doing forensics investigations. We had a few dams that failed. And probably the biggest thing there was just the dam safety community coming together to help the state of Colorado. We had folks that are in the audience. We had over 100 dam safety engineers that volunteered their time to do emergency dam inspections. The state of Wyoming came down to help us. FERC from San Francisco sent people out. So that was just a really good example of the dam safety community that ASDSO had built coming to help, Colorado in our time of need.
And there's really something special about that community in this room, and maybe you all have kind of distilled that from today. It's just a wonderful, supportive, collaborative thing. And Bill, you've paid it forward too, right? When South Carolina had issues, I think you kind of gave some advice to them on how to struggle and respond to an incident like this.
Yeah, that's been a good thing. We helped South Carolina out 2015, and then just 2 years ago, Ben Green in Vermont was a young chief of dam safety, and Jill from South Carolina and I got on the phone with him and gave him a bit of advice. So yeah, there's lots of that. It just goes back to the original states helping states together. So we have all these resources to do nowadays.
Well, that's one thing I've loved as I joined the association in 2008, and what I found is it didn't matter what our position was. We could sit down at a table and talk, and I had that experience last night with some younger engineers, and to sit down and talk with them and just share our common experience. As we came together as a community, one of the things I see we moved to is legislation, legislative advocacy. And Mark, you've been really involved with that. Can you just tell us maybe what growth did you see there? What was maybe the greatest accomplishment in that legislative advocacy for the association?
Yeah, in this past decade, I've had the great fortune to be able to help continue on with our advocacy, and I think the big thing that we saw is the collaborative efforts that we've been able to put together with other groups and associations. We saw the authorization of the High Hazard Potential Dam Rehab Grant as part of the National Dam Safety Program, and that really came from the efforts of Lori especially, and Brad and John, and all that they had done, and with Brian Palish at ASCE, and we were just kind of contacted by a senator who wanted to, Senator Reed wanted to do a dam rehab grant program for his state and make that national. And so the efforts that they had done, we were able to move forward with that, and that got passed in 2016. And then because of those efforts, and then the collaborative effort that we had with the Uncommon Dialogue, where we had groups, public safety groups like ASDSO and ASCE, joined up with environmental groups such as the Nature Conservancy and American Rivers and others, and hydropower advocacy with National Hydropower Association and others. So we were part of that group that was just the Uncommon Dialogue, and as most of you know, because of the position that we had been able to put ourselves in over the years and the advocacy that we've done in working with those collaborators, the infrastructure law came into, had that opportunity, and we had $2.4 billion, I think, for the rehab, retrofit for hydropower and removal of dams. So that's a huge accomplishment that I think that this association, and working with all of you and our collaborators, that we've grown to be able to work with them to put us in a position to be able to achieve those type of things.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks. And, we're about to end this session here. Mia and Sharon are going to come up and present their vision for the future, where all dams are safe, some of the great projects that ASDSO is embarking on in the next few years. But we haven't heard from David yet. And I think it's important, to, again, stress that bound by one mission, one vision, everybody in this room really needs to take that to heart, during the conference and afterwards, right? And how we can all build a stronger dam safety community. David, you spent a lot of hours being one of those leaders in the community, dedicating a lot of time and effort. So can you speak to the importance of just, showing up and being here to help everybody grow our programs individually and the association?
So when I first started with Georgia Safe Dams, I was told by my boss, Tom Woosley, about a year later, that I was going to be on the training committee. So that was my first experience with really doing anything with the association. I do have to say, Susan called me after, even though Tom had said that he wanted me on the committee, Susan called me to make sure that she really wanted me on the committee. The training committee does a lot of great things. We've got great training. We've got webinars. We've got classroom courses. We're doing some of those virtually now. We've helped to develop these 15 YouTube videos for dam owners that we can reach out to them and talk to them in a language that they understand, not necessarily the language that we always speak. And we've got the Dam Safety Toolbox, which is one of the things I'm really proud of for my presidency. That was when we launched the Dam Safety Toolbox. And I think that that is going to be an amazing repository of data and knowledge in the future. Another thing is I've become involved more with the association and my time with the board. We get into a lot more with advocacy. We advocate for safe dams. We advocate for the people that live downstream of dams. We advocate for people that recreate around those dams. But we've also, over the years, become advocates for levee safety. ASDSO was a charter member of the U.S. Levee Safety Coalition, and we continue to work with that coalition to improve safety of levees throughout the country. I think it's important that we volunteer. This association, the staff in Washington and Lexington are amazing. They can do amazing things, but they can't do everything. We need volunteers. That is what keeps the association going. That's one of the things I harped on as the president. You see a good selection of volunteers up here, but there are a lot of volunteers out there, and there are a lot of people out there that are not yet volunteers that are going to be volunteers. So I encourage you to be involved in the association in any way that you can, whether it be start out with a committee, start out with an interest group, start out by posting something on Collaborate. There are so many ways you can be involved with the committee, with the association, and I think, as our outgoing board member said yesterday, whatever you give, you will get back more than you gave. So we have really looked at the history. We've had a great 40 years. It's been an amazing time, but our best days are ahead. We have a bright future ahead of us, and we're going to have our current president, Sharon Tapia, and our incoming president, Mia Kanik, are going to give us a little background on what they see as the future of the association.
All right, thank you, David. Okay, so looking back over the last 4 decades, our knowledge related to dam safety has advanced by leaps and bounds, if you think about it. We've had huge advances in technologies, lessons learned from past failures, and innovative research. And it's really hard to imagine the advances that are going to occur in our next 40 years, right? So let's just focus on what's within our reach, right? I'll say the next 10 years to make it easy on us here. And so I really want to thank the people that took the time to do that survey at the beginning. And I think they're going to put the results of the survey up there. They are up there for you to look at. And so if we see, obviously, that the focus here is climate change, funding, and aging infrastructure. And then on the next part of the slide, we asked to pick the one topic that you thought was the most. And it came out to be those 3 again. So no surprise. We're all living with aging infrastructure. It's what I do daily as I think about aging infrastructure, our dams that are 100 years old. How are we going to rehabilitate them? How are owners going to get funding? And I know that resonates probably with all of you in the jobs that you do too. And so these are going to be key topics for us to be able to solve to keep our dams safe going forward. And so as you think about these items, what can we do in our committees that we already have underway, or what new projects do we need to help start solving this for our future? And, you know, we'll be going into our next planning for our strategic plan pretty soon, actually, right? As you finish one plan, the next one's right behind it. So we're really looking for diverse opinions and people to be as part of that in knowing how we're going to tackle this going forward. And so the other survey question was talking about the workforce, because I think no matter what our challenges are ahead of us for the future, we are the solution. No one else is going to solve this. We're the ones that need to solve this. And so we're the ones that are going to make the difference. And so if you look at the survey for the workforce, it shows that we have about 60% that are not going to leave the industry or community in the next 15 years, which may sound okay, right? But man, we have 40% that are going to be changing in the next 15 years. And 15 years goes by pretty quick, I'll tell you. And so what are we going to do? So we know how important it is to have good people in this field, and we know how rewarding it is to work in this field. So how can we share that passion with others? How can we attract more people at an earlier age into dam safety? How do we ensure that our recent graduates, once they graduate, they stay in engineering and don't go off into other fields? And how do we accelerate on-the-job training for our new graduates? Because that's what's going to happen as these people start rolling off in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Trying to bring new people on and get them up to speed is a challenge. And so as a takeaway today, I want to challenge you all to think about that and look for innovative ways to support our changing workforce in this next 15 years, either through efforts led by ASDSO or just within your own local community.
As the video said earlier, we are all bound by one mission: to improve the condition and safety of dams and lower the risk of dam failures through education, support for state dam safety programs, and fostering a united dam safety community. This mission is bigger than one person, so I would like to challenge all of you to volunteer your time to ASDSO if you haven't already done so. Pick an area that interests you. Let it motivate you and inspire you to give back. As you've heard from all these panelists on stage, ASDSO has accomplished great things with a lot of help from volunteers and staff. But we want to keep growing and do more great things. So please consider getting involved and helping the association. Thank you.
All right, to wrap this up, I want to sincerely thank all of you for your continued support of the association. I want to thank the hundreds, I think it's like well over 300 volunteers that serve as board members on committees, task groups, interest groups, and as our subject matter experts. I want to definitely thank Lori and her ASDSO staff for their excellent work all year long and the effort it took to put on and organize a successful conference of this size. I want to give thanks to my fellow executive officers, John and Everett, for doing a great job today moderating our trip down memory lane. And I want to give a very special thanks to all the panelists for participating in ASDSO's celebration of the 40th conference. And so with that, I would like all of our panelists to stand so we can give them a round of applause.